Hi, welcome everyone to Working Well Trans, Thriving and Surviving, a Pride at Work Canada virtual panel discussion. My name is Connor Pion, and my pronouns are he, him, and they, them. I like both. And I am the Senior Programs Coordinator with Pride at Work Canada. I'm also a proud trans and non-binary person. And so I am very, very, very honored to be your MC for today, as this topic is extremely near and dear to my heart. Next slide, Irfan. Thank you. So a little bit about us. Pride at Work Canada, or Fierté au Travail Canada. Through dialogue, education, and thought leadership, Pride at Work Canada empowers employers to build workplaces that celebrate all employees, regardless of gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation. We help create safer, more inclusive workspaces that realize the full potential of all employees and bring down barriers to employment. Our learning, networking, and community events happen across the country, celebrating and connecting the most inclusive Canadian employers. Whether this is your first time joining us at a Pride at Work Canada event, or if you attend every event, we're so happy that you are able to join us today. Next slide, please, Irfan. Thank you. So Pride at Work Canada works on the traditional territories of First Nations people, Métis Nation, and Inuit. These include Two-Spirit and LGBTQ Indigenous people. We recognize that there are multiple barriers that impact Two-Spirit and LGBTQ Indigenous people from accessing meaningful, affirming, and inclusive employment. In our work, we look to reduce those barriers and are open to feedback from Indigenous workers, employers, and job seekers in making that a reality. Pride at Work Canada offices are located in Toronto, which is covered by both Treaty 13 as well as the Discipline Spoon Wampum Treaty, and is the traditional territory of Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, and urban Indigenous people from all over Turtle Island. Today, I am zooming in from along the Gitchizibi, Ottawa River, on unceded Omami Wininewug Algonquin territory. So I share my deep gratitude with the Algonquin Nation and people for caring for this beautiful land and water. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some housekeeping. So Zoom has likely already notified you the session is being recorded today. Closed captioning is also available. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll find a button to select this option. Closed captioning is being provided by National Caption Canada. Shout out to Rhonda, who is working with us today. Thank you, Rhonda. And you may have also noticed that this session is in Zoom webinar mode. So this means as participants, you can make use of the chat as well as the Q&A box, but you won't actually be able to turn on your video or your audio. This session will last 1.5 hours and will end at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, and 3 p.m. Newfoundland time. And we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So please submit your questions via the Q&A box, as questions shared in the chat can sometimes get lost in the sauce. And only questions related to the subject will be answered today. And if we don't get to your question, feel free to email it to us at info@prideatwork.ca. And then at the end, we'll be wrapping up with some resources as well as upcoming events. So if at any point throughout today you experience any technical difficulties, we encourage you to connect with our team. So Prue is available. You can send direct messages to Prue using the chat, and she can work with you through any tech troubles. We also have my wonderful colleagues, Luis and Micah, who are supporting in the group chat. So thank you, Prue, Luis, and Micah. And with regards to the chat and the questions, we invite you to help us cultivate and maintain this virtual space as one of inclusion, care, and belonging. So before we introduce our panelists, I'd like to offer a few quick high-level snapshots of the current landscape for trans and non-binary employees and job seekers. So a few examples of what trans and non-binary people often navigate as employees and job seekers include tokenization, as well as other impacts associated with visibility, such as social exclusion, invasive background checks that sometimes force us to out ourselves with HR, even though and when we don't want to, a lack of benefits or inclusive health coverage for gender affirming care of our relationships, our family, a lack of gender inclusive facilities like washrooms or change rooms, and then gender exclusive forms or even dress codes. And all of this on top of, misgendering, misnaming, harassment, and violence. I thought I'd also share a few relevant statistics from TransPulse Canada's most recent survey, which collected data from 2,873 trans and non-binary people across Canada in 2019. 87% of respondents indicated that they had completed at least some college or university. So nearly all. However, only 45% of respondents had access to permanent full-time employment, and 45% of those reported a personal annual income of less than $29,999. So let that sink in for a minute. And then on average, about 33% of respondents identified that they had been fired, dismissed, or turned down for a job that they interviewed for because of who they are. And this was highest for those who identify as Indigenous, almost half. And so among racialized trans and non-binary respondents, 72% had experienced verbal harassment in the past 5 years, 45% had been harassed at work or at school, and 73% worried about being stopped or harassed by police or security because of who they are. So social exclusion, discrimination, and violence undoubtedly have had systemic impacts on the economic and employment outcomes of gender diverse people, especially on those with multiple intersecting identities, where it's compounded by things like ableism, anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, and the systemic violence resulting from colonialism and white supremacy. That said, trans and non-binary folks should not be solely defined by or illustrated through the discrimination we face or statistics. Our excellence and resilience as trans and non-binary individuals leads us to persevere, often through our own ingenuity, innovation, our independence, as well as through our community support. While building ourselves up, if and when we're able, we build up those of us around us along the way, strengthening both our individual and community capacities, opportunities, and networks. And today we are joined by 3 brilliant trans and non-binary leaders and professionals who are creating spaces for trans and non-binary employees and job seekers to survive and thrive. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to share this virtual space with the folks that we've invited today. They're absolute superstars. First, I'll introduce my wonderful colleague, Irfan, who will introduce the panelists. You can go to the next slide, please, Irfan. Thank you. So Irfan Lakhani, whose pronouns are he, him, is a student at X University, previously known as Ryerson University, and is completing his Bachelor of Commerce degree from Ted Rogers School of Management, where he's majoring in human resource management and minoring in marketing. Irfan has a passion for recruitment and selection, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as accessibility. And he is the programs assistant here at Pride at Work Canada, the director of corporate relations at Human Resources Students Association, where he oversees professional relations and manages sponsorships. And Irfan is humbled by the opportunity to work at Pride at Work Canada, where he is trying to learn and make the most of his time here by networking, researching inclusion policies, and helping to build the action plan for Pride at Work Canada. So a round of virtual applause for my colleague Irfan, and I will pass the virtual microphone over to you.
Hello, Connor. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the great introduction, Connor. I'm super humbled to be here. Before I move forward, I would like to acknowledge the land that I am currently residing on. I am a settler in Toronto, also known as Toronto, and I moved here in 2012. Without a further ado, let us introduce our panelists today. First, we have Karibu Ramos, who uses pronouns they, them. Karibu Ramos is a trans non-binary person from Cuscatlan, otherwise known as El Salvador. They are a firm believer that the marrying of the diversity, equity, and inclusion and the nonprofit industrial complex can only be dismantled by interweaving the voices of the communities advocating for justice. Karibu's ethic is informed by their lived experiences and the many movement builders that came before them. Karibu's work is deeply rooted in a self-reflective practice of compassion, trust, and the inner root work that is required from someone living with intersecting identities, privileges, and varying levels of access and inaccess. In their career, they have implemented transformative approaches to trans solidarity in the workplace. Karibu's commitment and the tenacity to influencing sustainability within traditional and non-traditional employment avenues with and for trans and non-binary communities has been a catalyst in influencing cultural and systemic shifts in Canada and the US. Karibu is unrelenting and deliberate in their pursuit of creating autonomy through an intersectional approach towards justice. Karibu Ramos is a writer, equity consultant, and the founder and executive director at Elevate Equity. Elevate Equity is Toronto's first BIPOC trans-led organization promoting employment equality for all Black, Indigenous trans, and non-binary communities of color. Karibu, it is our pleasure to welcome you today at this panel discussion, and we are humbled by your presence. I really look forward to having great conversations with you. Next, we have Dani Gomez-Ortega, she, her pronouns. Dani Gomez-Ortega is a diversity and inclusion champion with a passion for empowering others to create more inclusive spaces. As the Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Loblaw Companies Limited, she leads the strategic development of initiatives that removes barriers to success for over 200,000 employees across Canada. Additionally, she sits on the board of directors for Dignity Network Canada, an organization that advocates for the rights of 2SLGBTQ+ people globally. Prior to her work at Loblaw Companies, Dani has had a number of leadership roles in community organizations like Pride House Toronto, Toronto Plea Flag, and Out and Out Toronto. Her contributions have been recognized through various awards, including the Bill 7 Award, Ryerson University Student Leadership Award, and most recently, the Janice Waddell Collegiality Award. Dani's work and commitment to inclusion are shaped by her experience as a Latinx immigrant transgender woman with an invisible disability. Glad to welcome you on board, Dani. I really look forward to having curated conversations with you as well. Moving on to our last but not the least, the final panelist is Val Walls, using pronouns they, them. Val brings 25 years of experience in sales leadership, and sales performance development across multiple industries: distribution, retail, service management, technology, and most recently, financial. Val is currently Director, Sales Effectiveness at Scotiabank. As a certified coach and transformational change agent, they focus on developing high-performance cultures through the process of structural alignment and competency development to model behaviors for a winning outcome. In addition, Val is actively involved in diversity and inclusion work within Scotiabank and is the chair for the LGBT Global Council of Chairs. Externally, Val sits on 2 boards, Pride at Work Canada, Director National Strategy, and with Good Educational Services leadership role in developing educational strategy for Indigenous peoples in Northern Ontario. Hello, Val. Hello, all panelists, and hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Hello, Irfan. I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I am amazing, and I'm really stoked and looking forward to today's hour and a half conversation that we are going to have today. Before any further ado, let's move into the question and Q&A session and the discussion that we have for today. And my first question is for you, Val, actually. In your opinion, how has covering one's identity in the organization lacked belongingness? And why do you think many people struggle with living as a trans person at work or even in groups when they're hanging out with friends and acquaintances?
Okay, thank you for that question, Irfan. So first of all, I just want to say, I am stoked as well. And I am honored to be on this panel with Karibu and Dani. And I say that because of all the amazing work that the two of you have been doing. And when I look at it from there's a huge generational gap here. And I love that where we are sitting at today and the movement that the three of you are going to be, that you're making to change our direction for the future. I just wish I had known the three of you, when I was at your age. But nonetheless, to your question, Irfan, because it is a fantastic question. My response to that question is in terms of that sense of belonging. Well, think about this, covering up anything. When we cover up anything, it really sends a message to oneself. It sends a message to others that you're not okay. So when we're in a situation where we have to hide, and hiding really prevents us to have the ability to be open. And if we cannot really be oneself, then it means that we really are portraying what we believe to be okay, what we believe would be accepted. And inadvertently, what that's doing, it's saying you don't belong. You don't belong as you are. And I know that's sounding as a general commentary, but it really is rooted in that. So essentially, I'd say, Irfan, covering up one's identity equates to I can't be fully here, or I believe I cannot be fully here in order to be accepted. And so there's this layer that is secretive, or it's not so open to allow for that open, rich dialogue that could take place and to deepen relationships. So to truly experience the essence, I'd say, of belonging, it means to be able to be honest and real of who one is. It means to be integrated as part of a team versus, just to be put on a team because of one's differences. Really is that can be almost thought of as tokenism. It also means to be part of a group without the focus being on the discussion about who you are and your differences. And that can show up in so many different ways, at least in my career thus far. Now, to your last point, or with respect to that particular last point about being part of a group without the focus being, or the discussion being about your differences, we're all human beings to start with, right? We all bleed red. We all have rich, diverse experiences. We all love in similar like manners. But, with respect to that last point, I think it also means that one would not be hiding their identity if they could really look around in an organization, look around in the crowd and see themselves. To belong is to recognize that who we are is not so unique, that we have two legs, or we are able-bodied as we're able-bodied, that we're human. And when it always becomes a topic of discussion, instead of being that you just belong to the human race, and let's really be respectfully curious and understand who you are, then it's tough to belong, right? Because there's a sense of I'm less than, and I have to address this piece first in order to be welcome. But I want to go to your second part two of your question. Why do people struggle, particular living as trans? I'm going to add and living as non-binary at work. Identify as gender non-conforming and or non-binary. So I would say, Irfan, simplistically speaking, I think there's two things. It is darn exhausting because it takes so much energy to walk the tightrope on what is acceptable. If every time you step out of your office, your cubicle, or step into the work world, and you know that it's what the first thing people are looking in terms of the physicality versus really getting a sense of who is this human being and having a heartfelt dialogue, that's exhausting, which leads to point 2. How far can one step into being their authentic self and not to offend someone, or constantly having to be in a position to having to explain oneself? So do you always dress this way, Val? With clothes? Yeah, I do. I choose clothes. But it's just these pointing out these distinct differences versus what a wonderful human being you are. And you've contributed a great deal to the meeting. So more broadly, I'd say, I would add to this, trans, non-binary individuals have added stress on managing their career. I think this is a really important point professionally. Career growth and advancement is less than easy for most people. It really is. It's competitive. We're wrestling through, a marketplace in terms of identifying where we can actually lean in and add some of our own unique spin and talent, selling our services and support in. But now you add to this the complexity of having to wrestle through potentially not belonging to one's, or not being able to be one's authentic self. So how do we belong? How do we wrestle through the whole career piece if we can't be authentically ourselves? Because you cannot bring your best game to the game. If we compare to athletes, an athlete who chooses to be up all night, not getting the good rest, consuming the wrong foods, will not be their best for that race. I mean, Andre Degrassi would speak to this. He cannot have that kicks at the start of the race. So why is it challenging? 2 things, Irfan, and this is I'm making it quite simple, but fear of being found out and not accepted, or skating this thin ice as to who can be trusted. So who do I open up to? Who do I deepen that relationship to? How will they hold that with true heart and care? So fear of being found out, of being oneself. The second piece, I'd say it's a challenge because fear of pushing the envelope to make change and having the impact to one's career. So those 2 factors, we are constantly wrestling through that, whereas we take other individuals, that's not even in the equation. They just show up, be their true, beautiful self. But if we were to show up and be our true, beautiful self, we have to consider that. So it takes, in summary of this, and to that point of your question, Irfan, I think it takes courage to step up into one's truth. I think it takes courage to stand up and be willing to be seen. And I think it takes courage to speak out and drive change. And this is an example of that type of courage, because many individuals desire they want to have the world broke free, but we need to have individuals like what we have in this panel discussion to support those courageous, breaking down the path to create, the pathway for others to have the courage. So I'd say that in summary, that is exactly why it is less than easy. Over to you, Irfan.
Yeah, for sure. Val, you touched on some really great points, and we do have a lot of courageous folks here in our room today, including yourself, Karibu, Dani. So thank you. And from what I gathered, it is hard, and there is that aspect of fear that is there. But when you said about the external, looking at it from an external point of view of how one person can sort of bring their self in this way to a workplace, we should look at our similarities as human beings and focus on where we are same rather than focus on those differences. So that was a key takeaway from me, Val. Thank you so much. As much as I love the idea of being out and proud, there are many aspects that may impact one's identity of thriving and surviving, specifically for trans employees and job seekers. So Dani, what advice would you have on this for folks?
Thank you for that question, Irfan. And I also have to just say, wow, thank you for that. I can relate. I feel like since I've come out, I need a lot more naps, to make it through the day. It is indeed exhausting being trans and navigating that every day. So yeah, I feel you. I really, really like this question. I like this question because typically we talk about success in the workplace. We talk about thriving. Like, what do people need to thrive, right? But I feel like we need to acknowledge that a lot of people, including trans people, are focusing on just surviving, right? So I think we need to have those two conversations separately. As Connor mentioned earlier, like in Canada, most trans people are barely living above the poverty line, right? We face harassment often. We have been ridiculed or refused care because we're trans, right? So that is the part of the reality of many trans people. And when we talk about inclusion in the workplace, we bring those experiences into the workplace, right? So if we face harassment, it's going to make its way to work, right? And it'll be on my mind and it will impact my work. If I'm afraid of losing my job all the time, it's going to impact my work. If I'm sick and I'm denied care, it's going to impact my work, right? So like I wanted to set that tone because like I want to say that if you're somebody that's watching right now, and you're trying to survive, focus on that, right? Like we need you. So focus on surviving. You're not alone. So just focus on that. So if you feel like you need to stay in the closet to survive, do it, right? The world is better with you here, regardless of whether you're out or not. And if you need to look for another job to survive, do that, right? There are many, many places in Canada, and especially now where there's an appetite to bring in difference. And I think there's many workplaces that don't see a difference as something that, like we shouldn't look at, but actually they're looking for people that are different. And they're looking for people with unique perspectives because they understand how much value that brings. So look for those people because they're there. They might take some digging, but they're there. So if you're surviving, focus on surviving, focus on making it to the end of the day because like you're a unicorn and we need you here. So that's one. Now, if you're in a place where you feel like there's potential to thrive, honestly, the sky's the limit, right? Dream big, lean into your mentors, find people that admire you and that you admire, ask them for advice. There are so many people around you that want you to succeed, right? They just want to know how. Sorry, my headphone is caught in my earring. I'm okay, folks. I'm all right. That the price of being beautiful, things just get cut everywhere. So yes, I would say like if you feel like you can thrive, like dream big, talk to people, raise your hand for different projects, apply to that promotion, be fearless because so many people have fought for so long for you to have that space where you can thrive for the opportunity. So it is really up to you to honor them by taking that jump if it's safe for you to do so. So again, if you're somebody that is trying to survive and make it through the day, focus on that. Don't worry about anything. Do whatever you need to do to survive. But if you're in a space where you feel like you can focus on thriving, take that leap, take that jump. There's many of us that are trying to get there. So if you have the opportunity, like use it and then use it to help others thrive as well. So that's what I would say to that. And does that answer your question, Irfan?
It surely did. It surely did. And one important point that you mentioned was you do you in summary. Like, don't compare your journey to somebody else's journey. If it involves around survive and focus on that and how to make that holistically best for yourself. And if you're thriving, as you mentioned, the sky is the limit. Nobody's stopping you. Keep going. So
Exactly.
Thank you so much for that, Dani. Changing the gear a little bit now, coming to you, Karibu. There are unfortunately still a lot of biases present. What, according to you, are the biggest biases against trans community, even in today's workplace?
Thank you for this question. I just want to say such a deep, deep honor and love for all of you, and just so grateful to be here. That's a big question, and I think a question that I get often, and I think ultimately a lot of employers wanting to find a way to unearth how these biases exist. I so appreciate Val and Dani's perspective on finding an entry point to exist, right? And hopefully survive and hopefully thrive. But I think where a lot of my work comes in, or where a lot of the work that I've been doing has been When and if some of us get there, how is it that we got there? What level of access did we have? What did our intersections inform in that opportunity to thrive versus those of us who will likely not get there or will not have the opportunity to get there? And so these biases to me, I mean, I can go down a list of how intersectional marginalizations impact our biases, our internal biases, the biases that we don't see, the biases that we don't want to see. And I think ultimately we can talk about structural racism and structural ableism and structural anti-Black racism. And we can talk about all of these various forms of oppression and how growing up and existing in these structural, I feel like there's a better word. Structural oppression doesn't seem to do it for me anymore. We've all been saying structural oppression in the DEI world. We've all been talking about racism. We have all these words now. And what I've noticed is that we have co-opted a lot of language. We've learned how to memorize pronouns. We've learned how to memorize certain verbiage that is going to say, I do not have biases. And we still do. We all carry biases. And so I think the conversation is less about how can I memorize what the definition of this word means, and more so what is deeply rooted in my psyche, in my spirit, in my being that I have chosen or I'm too afraid to look at because it would mean that I'm a bad person. And so the way that I approach our internal biases in this work through equity consulting is more so around standing in solidarity with folks who are different from us. And we can seek for similarities, we can seek for differences, and we can find, again, multiple entry points of seeing each other, of honoring each other. But it can't happen unless we look at that root of that pain, which is limiting to those of us that are oppressing and those of us that are being oppressed. We are all I consider all of us in the same boat. We are all being limited to access our full potential and love each other to our full potential. I could go on for this forever, but that's what I will say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karibu. Your point around focusing on some of the structural oppression, as you mentioned, just to bring a point from my perspective, a little off the boat when somebody uses the term microaggression, for example, right? I say, why are you using that term? Aren't those feelings valid? They have been oppressed for so long. They have not been given that chance. So why even we use that word? Like, it just does not make sense to me when we refer to certain folks with, there is a form of microaggression present there. So just taking a step back, realizing everybody's potential and why they are not at their maximum, I think is a great approach to look at the bigger picture. So thank you very much for that, Karibu. My next question is for you, Val. So how was it to get accustomed to a corporation and make changes from within at such a senior role?
Okay, that we're assuming it's such a senior role, but let's just play that one, that use that that it is senior role. I actually want to go back to one thing here. Dani, I love that you said we're unicorns, and it does tie into this question so nicely. We are absolute unicorns. And Karibu, thank you for that perspective, because it's so true, because part of this getting accustomed is that you're so right. I think we've been driving this language around D&I that has become memorized, almost rote, and yet it hasn't been internalized. So memorization, internalization, and therefore then being able to act as two different things. So I know, Irfan, I just went off on a little tangent here, but the question, how has it been to get accustomed to a corporation? I'd say that getting accustomed, it really depended upon the company. And I know if we followed and looked at LinkedIn, I've had a number of work for a number of companies. It doesn't mean I can't keep a job. or does it? It does mean, though, that I choose to work in organizations that will become accustomed to and allow me to be my authentic self. So I'd say I'd answer this question that there's a couple elements that are common themes for me when I reflect on my career. And I'm reflecting on the last 20 years, okay? I don't want to go beyond that because that's a whole other reality. If D&I wasn't spoken about at that point. So let me talk about three things that I would say that I would be a common roadmap for me. One is taking everything one step at a time. And with that, it's being gentle with what's possible to what is probable to what I would dream of having occur. So recognizing, to Dani's point, that, if you're only surviving right now, it's not about jumping out into that reality, right? But it's about taking one step at a time to what your step is. So with the first step from my experience has been, because I choose to be out at the forefront. I make a conscious choice to be a voice. I understand the risks and have experienced those risks in doing so. But I believe it's part of my role of why I exist in organizations. So the first step is being committed to showing up as my authentic self. And what that means is really allowing individuals to really see me, hear my perspective and my differences, to allow the conversation to unfold. I understand that's not everybody's at that level of readiness, and I totally respect it. But I have to look myself in the mirror and go, how did I do? Did I actually touch, move, inspire, make a difference today? Did I truly step forward into my authentic self and help carve the pathway? So that first step is really taking it one step at a time so that I can inform. And it often becomes to educate others. That part never exhausts me because it's part of the commitment I have to self, to others, and just in terms of walking this earth and what would be the legacy I'd leave behind within corporations. So that's number one. Number two, I'd say it's seeking opportunities really to make a difference. And I heard Dani speak to that as well. Find ways like volunteering. But this, for me, it started from within the corporation. It started from exploring the D&I strategy, or back then the HR strategy, and where was there language and or initiatives that really focused on that tied to the corporate, dovetail the corporate strategy, initiatives that really looked at the human aspect of all this. Do we all? Because the typical thing is we look at from gender, right, and it's only from male, female. It's like, okay, that's limiting in and itself. That's a very binary perspective, right? So I started with that in each organization. So where are we with the D&I landscape, and understanding that to find an edge of what would be the level of tolerance to be able to bring forward a new idea. So once I understood that, I could then start making these gentle links. And I'd say that the most success that I had was really leaning in and chairing ERGs or driving to create an ERG or BRG, because if we go back a number of years, ERGs didn't exist, okay? So it was really pushing the envelope of driving part of that strategy, the importance of hearing the voice of team members, the unique voice and the different landscape that we could bring to the table. So ERGs become a really rich, in particular today, a powerful resource for leaders to be part of a dialogue and really understand and make the connection of what's really happening and or not happening, as well as like I talk about this reverse mentoring, having ERG members actually be the mentors to the CEOs and to the senior leadership team. And I'd say that the pillars that when I look at the work I've done with ERGs and currently do, it's really three aspects. It's around awareness, and that's at all levels. It's about educating. So that's really driving and shifting knowledge and understanding. To your point, Karibu, really tackling some of the biases and then conscious biases, which is less than easy when we have people start stripping away, self-reflecting, and perhaps encouraging to get comfortable to stand naked within themselves in order to rebuild. And then the third aspect of the power of ERGs that I've worked with is really setting up events, and I'm going to use the word intentional events, that it's not like check the box, look at, we've done this. We had a panel of women, wonderful. but have we had a panel of trans individuals come and speak to shift and change the policies and the benefits, right? So really starting to push the boundaries on. So the first one I spoke to, Irfan, was taking it one step at a time. Second was seeking opportunities to make a difference. The third piece, I'd say, in terms of getting accustomed to corporations to make change at a senior level, really comes down to this. And I'm doing a lot of work on this one, developing allies to support the work, to support the message, to have the impact to what we're doing as a team. And so it takes allies, a broad team of members in order to drive action. And so it's really about how team members, and it's really, I would come down to this with allies. It's helping allies wake up that it's not checking the box, but wake up at the impact that's occurring around them. They have team members who are afraid of coming out, and I appreciate not everybody needs to necessarily come out, but who are afraid of stepping forward to throw their hat in the ring for a role, that are afraid to participate in a sales conference because, gosh, we have to share rooms and there's been dialogue that nobody wants to share with you because you look different. So it's about having allies really understand what their role is and the importance about contributing to being part of the solution to create a culture. And I know we're using this word a lot, to thrive versus survive, but I don't think those words could be underutilized at all, because in the end, many people, whether trans, non-binary, are just trying to survive. They are just trying to work through the landscape of the corporate world. And yes, there's an extra element, an extra layer of complexity, without a doubt, when you stand out as a unicorn. And we do stand out as a unicorn, which is beautiful, wonderful. And what I love about it is it generates conversation. And so as soon as we can stand out as that unicorn, we cause people to look and go, and we cause people to be uncomfortable potentially. We cause people to have to ask themselves questions. And it's wonderful because then we get to step in and go, let me embrace you. Let me walk you through this, right? So that really is, how is it to get accustomed? It's about, again, I keep using the word courage. It's about really knowing your level of what do you desire to do. Not everybody's at the level that wants to stand up and be the one at the forefront, with the flag, charging down and saying, come along with me. But that's, for me, has been my passion. And I think others had kind of jump on the bandwagon to the degree that they feel comfortable with. But it comes down to recognizing, what step can I take personally? And it might be just a quiet sideline conversation, or it might be I'm getting on the loudspeaker and I'm going to announce that we're doing LGBT 101 training, seeking opportunities to make a difference, right? And bring that forward in a strategic way. That's really important. I'm emphasizing that because it has to tie to strategy. And then when I say that, there's always a way to be able to find a method for strategy within corporations. And then the third piece is really developing allies. And I know that there's so many cisgender team members out there that want to be an ally. They're just seeking to understand and find out how do they lockstep to support the work that you're doing. So Irfan, that's how I would respond to that question.
That was actually very, very informative, Val. You sort of touched base on like what I like to call like a ripple effect, right? Like start from the center point, from taking it one day at a time to sort of like going outward and then going outward. So making and building that connection and seeing where you can get involved or an individual can get involved, and then leveraging that as a way to building those connections further and making that allyship bond even stronger. Thank you very much. Honestly, for me personally, the reason I wanted to do this specific panel discussion was for my personal growth as well. And I feel like even though we have not completed all the questions yet, I am so much more comfortable in knowing about trans folks and educating myself. So thank you very much for that, Val. And moving on, actually, like these were some of the changes you mentioned, both internally and externally. But Dani, my question to you now revolves around the workplace changes. So what are some of the changes that you may like to see at the workplace to ensure trans visibility? How can we ensure best practices in the workplaces are carried out and being done across organizations to create safer spaces for trans communities?
Thank you, Irfan. And before I answer the question, I do want to honor a couple of things that were said. Karibu, I want to, oh, sorry, got something in my throat. Hold on 1 second, sorry. Okay, that's better. So I do want to honor what Karibu said. Thank you for talking about like the meaning of words and how they've been co-opted. I do feel like all these words have only become buzzwords. And so like I always, they're brought up, I'm like, okay, let's unpack it. So when you say intersectional, what does it actually mean? Let's talk about it as a group. Microaggression, what is that? Like, I thank you for saying that. Like, that's so important. So I wanted to underline that. And Val, like being partners of allies, so important. And I feel like, especially in the past year and a half, thanks to the hard work of Black Lives Matter, they've created this like awakening that you talked about, right? This appetite. And right now we are in a moment where there's a lot of appetite to learn, to move. So it's up to us to kind of say, okay, this is the way that you can help. So thank you for mentioning that. Around this question, what are the changes that I like to see in the workplace? The biggest change that I want to see in the workplace is that I would love for everyone in the organization to see that diversity and inclusion is part of their work, and also the role and power that they have to play in this conversation, right? So I am gonna talk about suicide for 3 minutes. So if you need to mute me, feel free, and just come back in 3 minutes. I won't talk about it for too long. Research shows that when a trans young person has a supportive person in their life, suicide attempts decrease by more than 90%. I'm gonna repeat that. Having a supportive person in a trans person's life decreases suicide attempts by more than 90%. This means that being inclusive and being a supportive person is not about being politically correct. It's not even about being nice. Being inclusive saves lives. And once people across the organization become aware of this fact, become aware of the power that they have to literally save lives, I think that's where we're gonna be able to really start seeing like massive change and massive movement, because like it's empowering to know this, that just by being inclusive and by being kind to people that are different, you can literally save lives, regardless of who you are and what role you have. So it's kind of like the big picture change that I want to see. In terms of the more specific change in organizations that I want to see, the bare minimum is pronouns, right? Like that is literally the bare minimum. Respect people's pronouns, respect how they want to be addressed, and that in turn respects their dignity to be who they want to be and to be who they are, right? The other piece is that I would love to see how harassment be recognized for what it is in organizations. So if we look at the definition of harassment from the Canadian workplace perspectives, it is improper, and I'm quoting, improper conduct by an individual that is directed at and offensive to another individual in the workplace. So it's basically any behavior that is offensive to somebody else or takes a dig at their dignity. That is a lot of stuff, including getting somebody's pronoun wrong all the time, or saying comments about the way they're dressed. Like that is harassment, and we need to treat it as such. And mistakes happen. Mistakes happens, right? But if it constantly keeps happening after, being corrected a few times, like that needs to be taken seriously. And the other big thing that I want to see in the workplace is make it safe for us to go pee, right? Like the washrooms is such a big issue, and it's a big issue for a lot of people, trans people and binary people, right? So make it safe for us to just survive and go to the washroom. And how can you do that? Create all gender washrooms, right? That everybody will be happy with that, I think. Just like single stall, all gender washrooms. Who doesn't love a single stall washroom? Like it's the thing. When I see one, I get excited. And if that's not possible, create sign in the washrooms that say, in this workplace, we respect the dignity of trans people, and trans people have the legal right to choose the washroom that's aligned with their identity. So educating people around just the basic rights will be a big improvements. And the other part of the question was how can people do this? How can people like move the needles? I know there's a lot of like allies, people that want to be allies listening, right? So if you're listening right now, be a champion, be a champion. When you go to your teams, tell them about this thing that you attended, tell them about the things that you learn, and say, how can we put what we learn into action? Write that down. If I was watching you right now, I will be writing, like, I will make sure that you're writing it down. So be a champion. Also, get the executives on board. Get them to start thinking about this. Use your employee resource group, and use all of them, right? So if there is an LGBT one, of course, use that one. But if there's one for people with disabilities, tell them, like, encourage them to think about trans people too, because there's trans people with disabilities, right? Intersectionality. If you have ones for women, get them to start thinking about trans women, because that's part of their group too. So really start, like, mobilizing all groups to go into that piece. And last but not least, solidify a lot of these pieces into guidelines and policy for the whole organization, right? Because this is not about being nice. This is not about being kind. This is about following regulations. Otherwise, you will get in trouble with the government, right? Like, we are a protected group. So, like, solidify that into our rights, into policies that you can then lean into when incidents do happen. Sorry, I went on a rant. Does that answer your question, Irfan? Yeah, Connor. Okay, thank you.
That wasn't a rant at all, Dani. That was super educational and informative. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge everything you said, from the statistics related to suicide to how we ourselves as individuals can be more inclusive. And one topic that I really admired that you touched on is about gender neutral washrooms and just simple washrooms. And one way for me, like, I was just somebody, like, a person at workplace told me yesterday that, oh, what about from the point of allyship, why don't I go in with an individual to show my support? And I never thought that, but allyship has no boundaries and it can go above and beyond. So thank you very much for that, Dani. And other point that that I would like to relate is on creating that self-awareness. And I think once we all as humanity understand the importance of self-awareness, everything else will follow. There will be no sort of like discrimination and differences, but just unity and strength between all of us. And my last question for Karibu, just relating off what Dani said around so for me, self-awareness comes with a lot of barriers as well, because sometimes I may not be aware, sometimes I make mistakes, but I learn from them, as Dani mentioned. But what are some of the barrier breakers that trans folks have to witness in their lifetime professionally? And how can one overcome them? And how did you overcome them, starting like your own business and like everything in general?
I appreciate this question so much. And I will start off by saying I'm just extremely grateful. It's an honor, and it's also an indication of my access, if I'm really being honest. And I'm always going to be honest. Dani, that was not a rant. I wish you would have kept going. That was brilliant. It was, yes, all of it. Barrier breakers. Do you mind expanding on what you mean by that specifically? I apologize. I need a refresher.
No worries. So from barrier breakers, it could be like, as I mentioned, like standing in solidarity with trans individuals to sort of like just bringing that change and sort of like being there for the person, or even from like from anywhere from a personal to a professional level. So at a workplace, to sort of like having that personal barrier, that how do I overcome this fear that Val mentioned earlier. So anything and everything, we are all yours, Karibu.
Thank you for clarifying.
Of course.
When I thought about this question originally, I think the biggest thing that came up was it would be so simple to have something on a job application that provides the opportunity for trans folks, or for anybody, to share their legal name versus their name. And I try to stay away from chosen name, because it's our name. It's our name. And that would be a barrier that could be broken. That would be excellent. That would be most excellent. But the thing that I keep going back to, and maybe this is a little like too cerebral, high level, you know, dreaming too far ahead, maybe. I would say that's also my favorite quality about myself. Um, is this requirement to this, sorry, employers wanting to bring in trans folks. My question is always why? Not because we shouldn't be there, but what makes your organization or your institution or corporation or workplace, whatever, whichever sector you fall under, why is it that you specifically as an employer that doesn't fully know why? That to me, you can put, you know, the option to share people's name versus legal name. You can have your email signature say she, her, they, them, he, him. You can create an equity statement that trans people can be here. You can have gender neutral bathrooms. That's all great and actually necessary and baseline also. Like that's the first step before you invite trans folks into the workplace. That's the very first step. And actually, I would include in that first step that you should already have trans solidarity training. You should be at a 201 or 301 of trans education. and there should already be a diverse team. There should already be racialized folks, differently abled folks. There should already be an understanding that we want diversity, we want transformation within our team and our culture. Before we get to, oh, we're going to go and we're going to hire trans people, or we're going to bring in the 2S LGBTQIA community into our space because it's profitable right now. And that's ultimately what I've been seeing is we are becoming a commodity. And so there are lots of ways that barriers can be broken. But I think I go back to the thing that I keep harping on and I keep talking about. I mean, our team meetings, I go down this rabbit hole, and I think one of my colleagues is here, but I go down this rabbit hole of, is there more that we could do? Because there is. And how do we get to thinking about that? And it's never a critique, and it's not coming from a place of shaming others, because that's also actually very useless in this work. There's no purpose or use for shame in this. And it's more so, how can we empower each other towards that transformative approach of compassion and honesty, radical honesty. And how did I do it? I don't know that I fully did it, to be completely honest with you. I don't see, I know I did something great. I will say that. And I'm very proud of myself. And I could not have done it if it wasn't for Black trans women, racialized trans women, like trans women, period. It would not have been possible if there had not been movement builders and organizers and activists and brilliant folks that made it in corporate, that made it, like Dani, wow. You know what I mean? Like if these folks weren't in those spaces already, Elevate Equity would not exist. So I have them to thank for first and foremost. And what I was able to do and kind of think of and strategize on and build has also been with the support of Black and Brown racialized folks. And that is a gift. I know how much of a gift it is to sit in a room with racialized trans folks, and we get to decide how we want to show up for our community and how we want to invite folks external to that to be a part of this work with us. But have I actually done it? I don't think so, because when I sign a new contract with a new client, I am very much, I know I have to play a particular role and a certain level of excellence that I am certain traditional cis, het, white, able-bodied equity consultants don't have to meet. They don't have to jump as high. And so my level of excellence has to keep surpassing it every time, which actually just makes it harder every time. And that's the reality of how structural oppression works, right? It's very low for some of us, and it's very, very high for others. And so that's how we bring our people up with us, but then they have to be even better than us. And it's this kind of like loophole of, will it ever just be easy? And I'm not trying to get bleak here, but I just want to be very honest about how did I do it? I don't know that I fully did it yet, but I am doing it. I am in the middle of it. And it's not just me. Most importantly, it's not just me. But that's what I will say. And thank you. Thank you for hearing me go down that I get really passionate. I care a lot. And obviously you can see that. So thank you, everybody.
No, Karibu, thank you. Those were some amazing words. To me personally, you have done it, and you are building that. You are a role model to so many out here, including myself, that you are being so humble, and like, I'm out of words that you still think that you haven't done it, but like, you're on the journey there. And to me, you have done it. And the journey, as I mentioned earlier, like, that's what matters, like seeing where we are. But you also mentioned a great point around patriarchy and how that is also in existence and will unfortunately be a part of our existence. Hopefully we won't need DI consultants in the future where everybody is like together, even though I'm in that field right now and I would love to pursue it, but that very passion comes from bringing that one line that will always be like, instead of like up and down like a mountain, it should be a straight road for everybody. It should be an equal access, no barrier road for everyone. So I really, really, really would like to thank you for being so personal and talking to us from that approach as well. Super humbled. At this point in time, folks, I am out of my questions. So I would like to thank Dani, Val, and Karibu for all the information and the ton of knowledge that you shared with us. At this point in time, I would like to open the Q&A platform for folks if they have any questions. Please type it in the Q&A box and we would be more than happy to answer questions. We have given approximately 20 to 25 minutes for this segment, so throw them our way. Oh, actually, we do have a few questions. So the first question is coming from an anonymous attendee. I would love to hear any advice around transitioning in the workplace. I have found myself in a tricky situation where some teams know me by they, them, and others know by she, her. Every time I correct someone or introduce myself with they, them, I'm outing myself, and that is not always something I would want to tackle. And correcting people still makes me uncomfortable. If anybody has experienced a shift in identity while at the same company/organizations, how did they approach it? Before we do answer this question, I would like to have a disclaimer that we will be answering questions only relating to this topic and to the professional experiences of our panelists. So by all means, if anybody would love to add on to this, Dani, Karibu, Val, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I'm quiet because I haven't actually experienced transitioning in the workplace. So I'm not certain I could actually give really good advice to this particular individual. Dani, perhaps you've got your hand up, so that's great. Then pass it to you.
Sure. Thank you for that question, and thank you for starting this journey of being your authentic self at work. It's a big leap. It's a very big leap. In terms of who knows what when, that's a hard one. I think that's when that's a really, really, really hard one. So I'm gonna tell you like how I personally did it, and perhaps that might help you. So I came out in my last workplace, and I've been there for around 7 years by that point. So what I did was that well, first of all, actually it was longer than that. So I want to say like I came out of my workplace around like 6 years ago when I was signing the contract for my last role, 6 years ago. So I told my boss, I said like, I'm trans, but I don't want to do anything with that. And I don't want you to do anything with that. So from the moment I told them, my boss, that I was trans, I just told them so like they would know. And I didn't do really anything with that for like 3 years. So know that like just because you told someone doesn't mean that you have to do or tell any more people. It's really completely up to you. You get to design your own plan, right? Now, when I wanted to come out to more people, I sat my boss down, I sat HR down, and I said, like, I'm ready to tell more people. So we crafted an email that we sent to others saying, and I told them who I wanted to be included in that. And I just basically said, this is my new pronoun, this is my new name. My boss wrote that, right? Like, this is Dani's new pronoun, Dani's new name. Let's use it. And so I got to control that piece. Now it does get a little difficult when you want it to be more private in your media group because people do talk. However, it is important to know your rights. You have the right to privacy, right? And you have the right to be free of harassment. So if you feel like people are saying things about you, that is an action that is demeaning to you, you need to talk to HR because that is harassment, right? But you get to control your narrative and you get to control who you tell. If you feel like you're not being included in your workplace, right? If you feel like your boss is not supportive, give them a chance, but know that there's also other organizations out there that are looking for us and that do make it safe for us. So that's my personal experience. I would say like you get to craft, but also you get to protect your privacy, and that is your right if you want other people to know. I hope that helps a little bit. I know that I answered all your questions, but I hope that helps a little bit. And the last thing that I would say, I would also encourage you to attend other support groups where there might be other trans people, because I think that's where you also get a lot of your knowledge, to ask other people, how do you do it? And you can pick pieces that might help you. But that's just how I personally did it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I would like to add in as well, that we should always remember that it's a two-way street, right? As Dani mentioned, that from an employer's perspective and an employee's perspective. Unfortunately, many a times employees, specifically trans employees, do not have power over there to control where they apply and where they get the job. So it's a very fine line to understand that where they have that power, but if the power is granted, by all means, as Dani mentioned, utilize it and take it to your maximum advantage where you can be your true authentic self. The next question is related in support from allyship perspective. This specific individual mentions, I support youth in my role. How can I best support a youth that identifies as trans and experience biases while looking for work, or the youth may change their appearance from the surviving point of view to get a job?
I can answer this. I'm going to reread it first. That is so. We work with youth, and as trans youth, you know, there's also really, it's so common, and the amount of folks that have reached out to us, the amount of folks that have the exact same experiences are deeply troubling and deeply painful to witness, because I've witnessed it myself. And having to, you know, put a wig on and put makeup on and go back into the closet for an interview and use my dead name is a thing that I have had to do in the past in order to get a job, which I didn't even get in the end. But when it comes to supporting youth that are already in precarious situations and they are looking for support and are looking for a landing place for employment, I would say to connect with, if I'm understanding correctly, you're a youth worker, to connect with employment agencies or to connect with youth employment programs where you can vet some of the folks that work there to be more knowledgeable on trans communities, trans and non-binary communities. And hopefully there is some networking that is possible so that folks that are applying to jobs have already know that there is a place that they can go where they don't have to go back into the closet, where they don't have to perform a gender that is not in alignment with who they are. And this can be really difficult, of course, but that's an avenue that I have worked with folks in attaining employment that is trans affirming. And then, of course, hire equity consultants. And this isn't me just, trying to sell a service. I really do believe that we're at a point right now where it is important for employers to become educated if they want to continue to not have lawsuits, because trans folks were also becoming much more aware of what our rights are. And we have every right to know these rights, right? And so that's what I'll say to that. Val or Dani, I'm sure you also have some brilliant things to add to that.
Well, Karibu, I don't know if it's brilliant, but this is an interesting one, because when you're supporting, a youth, someone that so therefore is growing into having the confidence and the courage and stepping not only into oneself, but then also into the game of employment. So that becomes a little bit of a delicate balance for sure. But what I'd share with you on that one is that to ask the question, how might I support this individual in terms of going through the criteria of selecting particular organizations that will be, trans positive, and that will allow, and you can see from how what the culture is, whether or not it would be even a safer place to be able to be one's authentic self. Because I give that to you because it's really the one gift I can share is that my experience having made some really bad choices because of the type of work that I desired to do, believing and knowing that I had the competency and the skill and the passion to do that, but in the wrong type of organization that was soul crushing. And in hindsight, it's always great, as we mature and we age, to look back and go, gosh, that was, I made that decision for all the wrong reasons. And what could have I done differently? And it really comes back down to one of the fundamental things. It's just say, is this an organization, a culture that, for at least from a percentage perspective, is 75% aligned to where my beliefs and values are? I do hope that I live to see the day that it's 100%, that there's more organizations. But I would say that that's an important piece in supporting whether it's a young person and or anybody who is going through and really stepping into their true identity and wanting to step into the corporate world. It's looking at that because it's very much you're buying, it's a two-way street. And so it's not about just the employer making a choice, it's you making the choice as well. And so, and I get it, we're talking about from it's our own security and safety in order to earn our own living. But it's also, we've got to be in an environment that will allow us to we talk about thriving, not just secretly surviving, in order to be able to give what the organization wants. What are they buying as your skills and talent? And it's how to work through that. And I share that because to show up as my true self in the finance world, in an automotive sector, was an interesting step, because I invested a great deal of time thinking about what to wear versus preparing for the darn interview. So whether we are 20 stepping into the organization or we're much, much more senior, it becomes the same question. How do I prepare by looking at the landscape of the organization, the culture to which I can actually be closer to my authentic self without being challenged? And so hopefully that gives you a little bit of that insight. Dani is raising her hand, so over to you, Dani.
Just to add to that, yes to everything that has been said. I'm just gonna add another layer of complexity to it. So I am someone who has experienced homelessness before, right, as a youth. And when you're in that spot, that the priority is safety, right? And if it is going into a job where I have to be in the closet for 3 weeks until I can be somewhere where I can be myself, hopefully, great. But I think that the focus should be how can we keep this youth safe? And creating a safety plan with them. So if they find a place where they can be themselves, amazing, those places exist, great. But there's a lot of places in Canada where that doesn't exist, or that's a lot harder to find, especially for youth that are vulnerable and all that, right? So I would say around that, like, do the safety planning. So if they desperately need a job to survive, help them get a job to survive, and then help them create a plan so they can be safe at that job. So perhaps it's looking for a washroom close by where they can change when they have to work, and then immediately right after change again so they can be themselves. And, you know, but like really focus on creating a place that keeps them safe, and that helps them survive. And again, the goal is to get them to thrive. But there's a lot of places where, like in Canada, where that's not possible. So like safety planning, safety planning, safety planning, safety planning. And I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, thanks for all of your input and feedback, folks. Moving on to the next question. I think this might be one of the more relevant questions. Well, all of them are super relevant, but like in terms of recruitment and applying for jobs per se, what are some of the signs to look out for trans job applicant for trans-friendly employers? And a second point that I would like to combine this question with is from the employer's perspective, potentially, that what are good places to go to recruit trans and non-binary folks to make sure that they're aware about the opportunities within trans and non-binary friendly companies?
Pride at Work Canada. Number one. Sorry, I just jumped in there. If I throw it open to the balance of the group, but that's definitely a key resource that we want to really emphasize.
I just want to suggest something. When it comes to the second part of the question, like how do you reach trans and non-binary folk? Like your organization needs to develop relationships with local community groups, community centers, support groups, and then, you know, invite people from those groups to information sessions. But like that relationship building with the community is so important. Typically, when it comes to recruitment, the model is we'll wait for them to come to us, right? When it comes to equity seeking groups, and I'm talking any equity seeking group, it makes all the difference when you actually make the effort to go to them. So find out where they're at, find out where they're seeking support, and then create relationships with the places that they're seeking support to tell them, we're looking for people, please send the people that you support to us because we want them here because blank, right? Like talking to what Karibu was saying, make it explicit that you want trans people there because you know the value they bring as people to the organization. You value their point of views, right? You want to make a difference in their communities, but build those relationships. So that's just my 2 cents.
Awesome, that's amazing. This is also, I believe, one of the more urgent sort of like way to look at this question. What do's and don'ts would you recommend for people leaders to consider when a colleague approaches them about coming out at work?
Well, I'll jump in here. We've got this big silence here. I think one of the do's is listen with full heart. Is the first step, is a do, and so in a quiet space, so that one can listen with intention to really understand. And so it's starting, I would say, as a do is really being present to the individual, because it's taking courage for an individual to even have that conversation. And there's a number of, I guess, other do's to that. It's really around what do this individual desire as a next step, because they're sharing it. Is it maybe this is the first step that they are just starting to really exercise the muscle for the first time, and it's only with you that they're going to have that dialogue with. And so you want to really be clear of what is the boundaries, right? Because that may just be that confidential conversation, because you've established, and good on you, a real open, trusting relationship for someone to come out. So do create that safe space, starting with heart and continue with heart, and only exploring as far as this individual wants to share. This isn't your story. It's their story. A key don't is do not share it. I cannot tell you how many times people are outing individuals. It's not your story. So do not share it. Do not, make it like a big deal where it's like, oh, okay, now we're going to schedule this cadence and we're going to have an ongoing conversation. We let the individual who's coming out to really, if we're riding a horse, let them hold the reins, let them ride, but know that, you have the bridle, you have the saddle, you have the safety net, so that they're there if they were to fall off. So it's back to being a true ally. I'm ready to stand in front of you, and here's what I can do for you. I'm going to stand beside you, and I'm going to walk this journey with you to your point of readiness. And I'm certainly going to, when you're ready, stand behind you to block anything that could be preventing you from being your full, beautiful self here. So just a couple do's and don'ts from my perspective when individuals have come to me. Over to the rest of the panelists.
I would also add as a do is to be really intentional about what a do is for them. Everybody, trans people are not a monolith. And so that's why some of these questions I'm like, I don't know if I can answer that for other trans people. Not saying that any of us are doing that, but I'm really mindful of that these questions are brought to me often in the work that I do, is like, what is a blanket statement that you can give me to be an ally? And I wish it was that easy. I wish I actually had the answer to just give you the very specific words and statements that will make it so that you can be an ally. But it's a lot more intricate. So I would say that communicate with whoever is coming to you in a way that is very intentional, and that they can let you know exactly what the do's and the don'ts look like for them specifically. Because for myself, in spaces where I have done that with another ally, I have requested, please tell people. I don't want to tell any more people. And when people misgender me, please speak up for me, because in that moment I freeze. And this is early on, but it's just something to think about in that regard.
That's fantastic, Karibu. I just want to bridge something here. I really, in all the conversations here, and you're right, we cannot speak, and I know I'm not, and I know the rest panels on behalf of all trans and their non-binary individuals. I'm going to simplify. I think, and I like to think about those things in life in a really simple way. It may just be how my mind works. But at the end of the day, it's about having a human-to-human conversation. And I really believe, as I'm much older, and when I look at this over the last 30 years, and this dialogue, the change in conversation that's taken place in organizations, I thought for me, one of the things that seems to be missing is that we are wanting to label. Where I heard, Karibu, you speak about, really having to peel back to get to the biases, because now we're trying to, what's the word for this? And to your exact point, I get asked as well, just teach me, what's that one phrase? At the end of the day, and I see there's another question, but, in terms of how do we actually have conversation with somebody with wrong pronouns, but it's the same thing. I know one language, it's English. So let's first start with that. Speak to me in English. The second piece is, let's just have an honest, heart-to-heart conversation. And that's really is about human to human. It's not overcomplicated. It really isn't. And so every human being brings different pieces to the table. I happen to be gender nonconforming. Okay. You happen to be, let's just say, cisgender. Okay. I happen to have, a stepdaughter. Okay. You happen to have no children. Okay. But at the end of the day, we're human beings having a conversation, seeking, this is the intentional piece, seeking with intention to really understand who is this other human being in front of me, so I can have a rich and rewarding relationship. And the only way we can deepen relationships is to pause, listen intentionally, and I keep referring to this about heart, because it's so important versus head. And my sense is that what's happening in organizations, we're intellectualizing this whole D&I experience versus we are being humans with one another. At the end of the day, I will never be 6 feet. I will be 5'1". I will always have blonde hair. blue eyes. I will always, in my life, be gender nonconforming. I am who I am. So it's about how committed am I and what's my intention to really know this other human being in front of me. So I just wanted to add that to it because I think there's times where we're making it like some kind of science. And when we peel it back and get the formula right, we're an Einstein, brilliant. And here's the mathematical equation we just solved for this. And now we can now communicate with all trans individuals. Perfect. It's not like that. At the end of the day, you're communicating and having a conversation with an individual who happens to be your same species, a human being, who happens to, when you discover, to identify as XYZ, but it's a human being.
Yeah, for sure. I believe that one thing that you mentioned, Val, is just to pause and reflect and listen. I believe like most of the times when I talk about a certain topic, I just get so dwelled into it that sometimes I forget listening to the other person about the knowledge they have, about what conversations we can actually have heart to heart, as you mentioned. So that is very important, I believe. And there's so much learning opportunities and growth for opportunities when it comes to that sort of like view. We do have a lot more questions, but unfortunately, looking at the time, I don't know where time just passed. It like in a flip of a second, and it's already almost 1:30. But to all the folks that have more that would like to get more involved or have more questions, please do send them our way or email it to us at info@prideatwork.ca. And I would just like Val, Dani, Karibu, anybody, if folks have any closing words, any final comments, anything along those lines, that would be greatly appreciated.
I just wanted to, sorry.
Oh, no, that's all good. I was just going to thank everyone for really their commitment of time to participating in our session, as well as I thank Dani and Karibu and Irfan and Connor. It's been a magical moment for me. And I just leave you one word and one thought here. Just love, be kind. And that's not one word at all. And just really connect heart to heart with every human being. It's a beautiful world out there, and we can make a difference, and we are making a difference. So Karibu, you've made a far bigger difference than you're giving yourself credit for. Dani, same thing. So continue this path. I want to come back in this earth working with you. I really do. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you again to Pride at Work Canada, for Irfan, for Connor, for Jade. It's always a pleasure to be connected to you all, and it has been such an honor to be witnessing Dani and Val, and just it's such an honor. I can't even fully express it. But yes, just so much deep love and gratitude. Thank you again.
And I also want to add, thank you for everyone. I want to thank the crowd for being here. And I also want to say to everybody, you have homework, right? If you are somebody that's trying to be an ally, you have a lot of homework. So it does not stop with just coming to this workshop and saying, okay, I'm an ally now. You have a lot of homework. So please, honor the time that we gave you by doing your homework and spreading the word. And thank you again, Karibu, Val, Irfan, for this opportunity in Pride at Work.
No, thank you. And I will definitely take that last piece of advice of doing my homework and contributing my part in the most and in the best way that I can. So once again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. Dani, Val, Karibu, you really empowered me to create a change coming in the near future when I graduate, as I keep working in my daily life, whatever route it be, that piece of knowledge and advice will always be there. So I humbly thank you, and I believe I'm saying it from everybody, from all our participants and attendees too, that this was a very informative panel and a session. And on that note, Connor, off to you.
Thank you so much. I just have so much love and respect and gratitude for all of the wonderful panelists, Karibu, Dani, and Val. Thank you so much for your time and your labor and your energy and your love and your compassion and your passion. And thank you, Irfan, for your moderation. And thank you to all of the attendees who are sharing this space with us and for the questions that you've shared with us. It really shaped a really beautiful and powerful conversation. I'm at time. I have so many feelings and calls to action that I wanted to re-emphasize, but what I'll do is just remind folks that the session is recorded, so you can access this as a resource in the future. All of the links embedded, you'll see our upcoming events. We have quite a few of other amazing events coming up. On the next slide as well, you'll see a whole bunch of resources that you can access. And of course, you can reach out to either myself or to Irfan or anyone from Pride at Work if you have any additional questions. But we'll be sharing back the PowerPoint as well as the recording, and hopefully as well share back some of these really critical calls to action that came out of this conversation for folks to be able to put into practice. So just thank you again so much to everyone. And thank you for joining us. Take good care and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, folks.